Good afternoon and welcome if you are tuning in now or joining us in the room at POLITICO's Sustainable Future Week Summit. My name is Leonie Keita and I am a chemicals and pollution reporter at POLITICO. We're about to drill down into one of the cornerstones of the EU Zero Pollution Strategy, its chemical safety laws. The scientific evidence about the severity of the global pollution crisis is clear, and a growing body of research on hormone-disrupting chemicals links such substances to everything from cancer and infertility to obesity and autism. But in the face of this growing chemical pollution crisis, many find the EU's chemical safety framework lacking. We've been promised a revision of the main piece of chemical legislation, REACH, next year, as well as progress on the PFAS restriction, the restriction to action on forever chemicals. But the EU is simultaneously trying to boost industry growth and competitiveness. Our speakers today are going to help us make sense of these twin aims and see if we can work out the path forward. So now I am delighted to welcome our panelists on stage. With us we have Patrick Child, the Deputy Director General of the Commission's Environment Department, Teresa Kiel, Head of Policy at ChemSec, Sylvie Lemoine, the Deputy Director General at CEFIC, and then Beatrice Timgren, a Swedish MEP from the European Conservatives and Reformists Group and a member of the European Parliament's Environment Committee. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us. Let's dive right in. So, the Commission's revision of REACH is coming in 2025, and I think everyone on this stage is eager to see the results of years of work. But we also know that there will be a new focus on reducing the burden for industry. Stéphane Séjourné, the new Internal Market Commissioner, has said that REACH will be aligned with the priorities of simplification, burden reduction, and competitiveness. Can you give us a sense, Patrick, of what this means concretely? Which aspects of the work already done on the REACH revision might need to be revised to work with the EU's new competitiveness drive, in your view?
Well, Lena, thank you very much, and it's great to be here. And indeed, I mean, this is one of the sort of central elements of the clean industrial deal that President von der Leyen has announced as sort of flagship of the mandate of the next Commission, is a specific package of measures to address the challenges facing the chemicals industry, chemical sector. And so we're very much looking forward to working with all the different stakeholders to develop some proposals which achieve, I guess, two things. I mean, firstly, to improve the level of environmental protection, the protection of human health, of the increasingly damaging consequences of having chemicals and other hazardous substances in the environment, but at the same time doing that in a way which equips the European chemicals industry to remain a very strong and pillar of our overall economic system. And so, I mean, one part of that will indeed be the revision of the REACH regulation. And I guess what we want to do is a combination of simplification and modernization. Simplification in things, in particular, the very heavy system we have at the moment for individual authorization of very hazardous substances, where we hope to move much more in the direction of sort of restrictions which control more a collection of substances. We want to improve enforcement of the existing rules to ensure that we are not exposed to imports or cross-border effects from other parts of the world. And I think we need to look at how to make the existing framework, particularly the recent changes we introduced in the classification, labeling, and packaging of chemicals. We need to make that effective, particularly when we're talking about PFAS or endocrine disruptors, with a fresh look at the information requirements that we ask companies to produce when they register chemicals with the agency.
And if are there bits of work that have already been completed on REACH that will now need to be changed to comply with this new direction?
Well, I mean, we've been working on the possible revision of the REACH regulation for a number of years. It was already, something which was highlighted in the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, which was the sort of framework for chemicals that was agreed as part of the European Green Deal, and which remains, I think, fully valid today. And so we've been looking at ideas like how we can, particularly when it comes to consumer protection, move in the direction of generic risk assessments. That's sort of looking at groups of chemicals and taking a decision about how those chemicals can be better sort of restricted in their exposure to consumers, rather than the sort of individual case-by-case authorizations that we have at the moment. And so that's one piece of work that we were developing and where we now need to, I think, bring it to fruition. We've also been looking at things like the challenge of mixtures. So if you've got two different hazardous chemicals coming together in a mixture, is the sum of the parts actually potentially more damaging, more dangerous than they would be individually? And we have to see whether, with the revision of REACH, maybe we can address also issues like that.
Great, thank you. Beatrice, what do you make of what we've heard from Patrick so far? I know that you are also an engineer by training previously. So what do you see as the way forward to reconcile consumer protection and chemical safety with EU competitiveness?
Yeah, with the REACH. I think one of the biggest problem here is that EU is falling behind when it comes to competitiveness and economic growth. And the biggest problem that we face right now in EU, and the biggest reason that we're falling behind, is high energy prices and also bureaucracy. So if we take high energy prices, for example, if we compare to the States, the energy prices in Europe is approximately 4 to 5 times higher in Europe than in the States. And then we have all the bureaucracy. So when it comes to REACH, it's really important that we don't put more bureaucracy and make it much easier for the company to actually focus on innovation and have possibility to find substitutes. Otherwise, we will have other consequences, like companies that moves out from Europe. And if you take the plastic industry, for example, last year the production fell 8.3%, and it was last year. And we can't not afford additional bureaucracy that undermines our competitiveness. And why do I talk so much about competitiveness? That's because competitiveness and the public health is connected. If we don't have competitiveness and economic growth, we don't have money and time to spend on innovation and find better products. So when it comes to REACH, I think it's really important that we actually make it much easier. The European Environment Agency said, that make REACH more efficient, beef up and simplify. And I think that's really important. So we need to focus more on high-risk substances. Not on substances that we have been used for decades, because we will use them in other applications, like, for example, sodium, glycerin, ethanol, or water-soluble salt like potassium chloride, sodium chloride. That's substances that we know they are not that harmful. So instead, it's much better to look at other kind of chemicals that we know can be harmful for for the public health. So more focus on right thing, and we need to cut red tapes and make it easier for the company to actually report the result, so we don't have so much paperwork. I think that's the most important when it comes to REACH.
And Teresa, would you like to weigh in here? And do you think it's possible to improve consumer safety under REACH while also hugely reducing bureaucracy as is being demanded by some corners?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to be on this interesting panel. And I want to give you a little bit of context to what I do and why we have the opinions that we do. I do believe that the most important thing with the revision of REACH is to give REACH the teeth it needs to fulfill the commitments that are already made in the chemical strategy for sustainability. So my organization, ChemSec, we collaborate with companies, with alternatives providers, and with investors. So companies that are responsible, they've been working on this for a very long time. For them, it's a competitive advantage to stay ahead of regulation. I mean, it's a business case for them. And the same really goes for the alternatives providers. For them, it's also really crucial that they are given the market that they should have according to legislation. Otherwise, all of their investments that they have done would have been in vain, and that's something that Juan Canton already mentioned this morning. I thought it was important to bring that up. I mean, these alternative providers, they are the real innovators that can take us to the green, toxic-free transition that we all want to achieve. So we need to support them. And then we also work a lot with investors. And everybody's been talking about investments and investors today, and we actually collaborate with them. We have a network with 67 institutional investors holding $18 trillion asset under management. And they care about chemicals, and they collaborate with us for that reason. I think that's really important to keep in mind. So all this work has led us to understand that the new REACH really needs to deliver on three things. Firstly, of course, we need to properly protect human health and the environment. That's natural. And to do that, we do have the great proposal of introducing a generic risk approach for all the most harmful substances. I think that's a very important key to achieve that. And secondly, we need predictability, and everybody can agree on that. And for that, we need clear timelines, and we need clear instructions on when it's possible to get a derogation and not. And that's not a get-out-of-jail card, so to speak. And thirdly, we need a level playing field. We need regulation to be the same for all companies and for all regions within the EU. The previous speaker spoke quite a lot about that. But also for imported articles, which is something that we're really lacking today. So if we set this bar in the EU, we boost this competitiveness, we boost these innovative companies, and that's really what we need in order to achieve these new goals set by the new Commission about really boosting competitiveness. This is how to create that setting. Thank you.
So would you say then, just quick follow-up, that this additional rule setting and additional bureaucracy will be necessary to reach those aims?
I think the idea with the generic risk approach is to not add bureaucracy. That actually is something that would be more efficient. I choose to use the word from Patrick here with a modernized REACH rather than a simplified, because this is a very complex topic. Everybody who works on it knows that. So I do believe that that's the intention of the generic risk approach, to actually take this group-wise and actually go through different product groups so we can detoxify them. And that also is imperative in order to achieve a successful circular economy. We don't get there without the toxic-free material cycles. And I believe that GRA is one very important element to go there.
To bring in Sylvie from the European Chemical Industry Council.
Yes, hello everyone. I would just like to step back a little bit on competitiveness, only to confirm some of the data you had, and indeed, then Draghi said it, he was clear, and we shared the diagnosis. Short term at least, there's a real struggle right now. So the context has changed compared to when the Green Deal was launched. And competitiveness for the chemical industry is more than just REACH, of course. There's much more. And that's what I'd like to explain a bit before going into REACH. So we remain entirely committed to the Green Deal. We were one of the first sector to commit to climate neutrality. And yes, climate neutrality and circularity must remain clear travel directions for the industry in general in Europe. So that's a non-negotiable, clearly. Energy cost, I can only confirm what you said. It's huge because we are, in general, except the specialties, but we're an energy-intensive industry. Regulation is complex. It has become more complex, more costly. It also keeps changing, which makes it very difficult to invest, to predict. Demand side. We don't talk enough about the demand side. In general, it's low. In the sense that there is growth in Europe, there's global growth, but Europe is not getting a proportional share of the global growth. So we grow less than other regions grow. And it doesn't help our competitiveness. Now you could say our real growth potential, and it's true, is on more sustainable products. And if you look, I saw recently some data on the growth predicted for 2028. The potential for sustainability-related products is about 4 times higher. The growth potential is 4 times higher than traditional products. So there is a case longer term. The problem short term is that we don't have the profitability right now. No one wants to pay the green premium right now. The customers, the consumers, even 1 or 2%, it's about that range, sometimes 4%. Even that is too much. Because they're struggling, there's been inflation, everyone has high energy bills to pay. So the question is, how do we create the markets in Europe? Who's going to pay the bill? Are we all committed as a society to pay the bill? Are we sure we are not going to invent the Green Deal, but let others who are more efficient, the US with their incentives, China with their subsidies, we can't compete with China on subsidies, we can't compete with the US on incentives. So what is it that we're good at? Can we be faster? The worst would be that we invent the Green Deal and others do it and fill our markets with better products, right? And I'm more thinking about decarbonization here, not so much REACH, because REACH, we have generally higher safety standards. But decarbonization is happening elsewhere right now because we don't have this cash, the short-term profitability, to really invest in the clean technologies, in recycling, in circular economy. So one of the good things is that the chemical industry is actually worldwide leading the way on circular economy as well. So that's also a positive for Europe. So short term, we just need to reach the bottom of the pool, and that's why we're looking to the clean industrial deal, but also the burden reduction. We need policymakers everywhere to help us push at the bottom of the pool and go up and really don't continue to drown, but actually go up to the surface and breathe and grab this potential, because there is potential. So that's what we're facing right now. Now, this is a long introduction to say the context is different from when the chemical strategy for sustainability was launched. Does it mean we change our position? No. We've already said we support a targeted and effective revision of REACH. It has to bring some added value for industry. Digitalization, there has to be some new ways of thinking at it. I cannot believe that AI, can we have a European project research project to try to predict the properties of chemicals on the environment and on human health. It would accelerate the search for alternatives. It would, because no one wants to spend time on chemicals where you know what, one day or another, you run into a problem. It's not good for society in terms of production, it's not good for industry in terms of time lost. So that's also part of modernizing. It's, go away from animal testing. That would be quicker. I know it's difficult and there's a lot of subtleties, but let's give ourselves the means of our ambitions. Generic approach to some extent, but if you go too generic, if you go too broad on grouping, PFAS is a perfect example. If you go too fast, it may look simple on paper. The reality is that you end up with a lot of derogations. The world of chemicals is complicated because we have thousands of chemicals in thousands of applications. But can we use digital means to improve the supply chain communication? To feed the data to ECHA for the public consultation or to the member states? That's also part of modernizing, things that, please give us also this positive, this acceleration that we need to have, these incentives, not only the more punitive side. Of course, we need to find the right balance. Is the impact assessment that has been done, I don't know the details, but now we're talking about stress testing the EU acquis, we're talking about the value added, we're talking about competitiveness check. Has it been done? I don't have the answer. What I mean is that there's a new context, there's a need to do good on both sides, protection and competitiveness. And then restrictions have to be better thought as well. The member states have to be more coordinated in their approach. It cannot be that one starts something and then it's authorization and maybe a restriction and maybe another type of restriction. We need this alignment. I think you're right. We need to know which substances are regulated when. When are you eligible for derogations on examples? This has to be clear. A restriction does not have to be systematically a ban. You can control exposure in a plant with occupational exposure limits. There are some well-functioning restrictions that are not necessarily bans. For consumers, it's different. So we need this granularity, but we just need a common approach also in terms of what applies where.
And just one follow-up. It seems so there are some documents out there showing that CEFIC has suggested to the European Commission that an overhaul of existing legislation on chemicals is necessary, and touching on what you were saying before, that tweaks to the regime should first and foremost focus on better identifying problem substances through upfront analysis. I just wanted to follow up and say, when you say that an overhaul of existing legislation isn't necessary, not you, but this summary of the meeting, what does that mean concretely? Is that a push against a total revision of REACH, or is it looking for, what did that mean?
We never said we don't want a REACH revision. We just don't know. We've never seen the exact proposal. So we keep talking a little bit, speculating. For us, I think we had our 10-point action plan, targeted, tell us exactly what's the problem we're trying to solve. Let's do the reality checks. Substitution is complicated. It takes time. So we need to plan it. It has to be part of the R&D program in companies. But they know where to start. They need to know where to start. If we say all additives in PVC, or as an example, it's too broad. Mm-hmm. Which additives? Why? Which uses of PVCs may be a problem? Is it an environmental problem? Is it a health problem? Is it only with certain articles? What are we talking about? So there has to be this planning, and the restriction roadmap is not enough. Is not granular enough. One other word of caution, there's a huge backlog on authorization. Yes, for us it should be the last resort, probably, authorization, because the system has proved it has limits. Overall, REACH works well. It has all the key pillars. the data, the registration, the safety net for the authorities, the bans where needed. So the pillars are good. But we always said there are all kinds of small adaptations that need to be made. We're willing to look into it. I would be very cautious about the broad, grouping, the broad simplification, because behind that, what does it mean? So, and then again, the modernization, AI, please, or digital, please, let's look into that. Enforcement, cannot agree more. Absolutely, that's the bare minimum to make sure that the products that come via e-commerce, via our borders, are checked. There's plenty of data showing that we have a high non-compliance rate on toys, on cosmetics, on many consumer products. That's the bare minimum to ask that all products, all players on the market should abide by the same rules.
And Patrick, Sylvia had also mentioned learning lessons from the ongoing REACH restriction. Do you agree with that? What kind of lessons can be learned from the PFAS restriction? What kind of lessons can be learned from that? Because it does seem like it's been it's going to be also quite a long process and really quite a complex one for everyone involved. So what lessons can be learned from this?
Well, firstly, I'd like to agree with what Sylvie says, that the REACH framework we have is probably the most sophisticated and well-functioning sort of regulatory framework for chemicals the world over. And so we are looking to improve a system which we have and which works. I agree with you that the scale of the comprehensive PFAS restriction does mean that, because we have to go into a rigorous science-based analysis, we need to give the opportunity for all the different stakeholders, and particularly the industry that are potentially affected, to feed in their views, and then we need to go through that evidence and prepare a really balanced and well-functioning decision, and the sheer scale of the proposal at the moment means that we are struggling with the capacities that we have to digest all that in a short period of time. But I think that the ideas that we've been talking about, I mean, better use of digital platforms, digital solutions. I mean, already with our one substance, one assessment proposals, which are already in front of the co-legislators, we are trying to clarify and strengthen the role of the Chemicals Agency in Helsinki, the division of labour between it and other EU agencies that are involved in one way or another in the sort of chemicals regulation, food safety, the Medicines Agency, for example. But we're also trying to develop through the Helsinki Agency a new shared platform, so that all the available data that is in the EU system in one way or another can be easily accessed by all the different users, so member state authorities, ourselves, but also to have that accessible to industry. But I mean, I think your basic point that the timelines that we're looking at now for the global PFAS restriction is an illustration of the need for us to try and simplify and streamline what we're doing. I'm very hopeful that when we get through this process, we will have clarity on what is a very, very large class of substances, which where already we've taken some action in things like firefighting foams, in coatings for cooking equipment, for clothing, where already we have taken restrictions. But what we've seen then is that sometimes a very small modification in the chemical, which then escapes the restriction, is then another PFAS which has another problem, and we have to. So that's why I think looking at it in a global way, it does make sense. But I'm pretty optimistic that we can remain faithful to the basic principles of REACH, build on it to improve the protection of the environment and human health in key areas like endocrine disruptors, like the forever chemicals, the PFAS, build the sort of predictability also that Teresa was talking about, and improve the enforcement so that we do have a genuine level playing field.
Mm-hmm. Beatrice, does this sound promising to you when it comes to the revision of REACH moving forward?
Yeah, and the PFAS. I agree with a lot of things, especially when it comes to use AI. I think it's a really good way to use new technique to improve and make more innovation and find better substances that we can replace other substances that we know are harmful. And but another important thing here is that the politics need to work together with the companies, not against them, and give them enough time and a realistic timeline to do the adoption. Because I can just take from my own experience. I worked as a project manager for a few years. And I know that it can take years to change a production line, especially in brownfield, because it involves upgrading or modify existing production facilities. And often we need to do that while the production is still running, because the company still need to produce something. So that's why we need to have realistic timelines. And like I said before, the environmental and economic growth goes hand in hand. So if we fail, we can see that the companies may move to other countries, and it's not a benefit for the environment. So we need to simplify and put more focus on that chemicals that can be harmful. For example, bioaccumulative toxic substance like PBT substance and suspected CMR substances. In this way, we can find a good balance between public health and economic growth. And when it comes to PFAS, I know it's been a big debate about PFAS. And we know that PFAS, it can't be harmful. PFAS, it's actually a big group of chemicals. And the property can be harmful for a human because the carbon floor bonds is among the strongest chemical bonds that we know. But in some industries, we use that properties. It can make them valuable for application where you have high temperature or high or low pH. And so we don't use them for fun. We use them because we need them, and we don't have any good substances. So, and of course, we need to regulate PFAS, but we need to prioritize to phasing out PFAS where we have high risk of exposure in the environment, where we have high risk for PFAS to leaking out in the environment and be in contact with human. So such as cosmetic, for example, or food packaging, or clothes, or other applications where we have low control of the emission. There we need to start there. But in some application, PFAS has an essential role, such as batteries, electronics, and medical devices.
I just want to bring in Teresa here because she's also been working a lot on, ChemSec has been working a lot on PFAS alternatives. What do you make of what we've heard so far and when it comes to there not being enough alternatives, as Beatrice was saying, when it comes to PFAS? on certain applications?
Well, the first thing I want to say is I think that PFAS is the perfect example of how regulation drives innovation, because we see so many alternatives popping up everywhere because of the anticipation of regulation. And it's true that it's taking a lot of time for the ECHA committees to work through this very complex dossier. And that's okay, because it is a complex subject, and we're part of that SEAC process, so we know it very well. But we also see that there is so much to be gained from this, and it's true that for some applications it might be difficult to develop alternatives, but that is happening, and they should get a longer transition period. That's something that everybody agrees on, and those discussions are being held at the moment. But I also think it's dangerous to simplify the thinking about PFAS to say that it's just the direct exposure that is a problem, because nobody is expecting somebody to get health problems from wearing a PFAS-coated jacket. That is not the problem. The problem is much broader than that. We have the production, we have the user phase, and the waste phase. And we have to look at all of those things. We cannot take out chunks of PFAS uses because of the nature of PFAS. Like you said, it's the strongest bond that we have. It's an extremely persistent group of chemicals, and therefore we cannot afford to not make the restriction universal and encompass all the uses. And give proper derogations when necessary, absolutely, but with the aim to phase out everything. Because if we do not, I mean, it's like you have a water leak in your ceiling. You don't go up and ask the next door neighbor to turn down the water a little. No, we need to turn off the tap. That is the approach we need to have on this because of its extreme nature. And I really hope that the future generations will look back at us and be grateful because we showed courage to actually do this. It's difficult, it can sometimes be painful, but it is necessary. And I believe that it really can be done.
And just following up on these areas where it will be tricky to phase out PFAS, and also, Patrick, you saying about the Commission promising to provide clarity on the upcoming PFAS restriction. I wondered if you might be able to share more about the nature of that clarity that's going to be coming from the Commission, and if there's a timeline for when to expect that communication. I don't know what form this clarity will take. Yeah, I'd be keen to hear about this.
Well, I think that the chemicals industry package that the President has announced now for the end of 2025 will be an opportunity also to contribute some greater clarity to the discussion on PFAS. I mean, we of course need to respect the legal procedures. We need to give the agency the time to do the necessary consultation. But already you've heard our commissioners, Commissioner Rosval as well as Vice President Séjourné, talking about making a clear distinction between consumer uses and industrial uses. That doesn't mean that industrial uses are completely safe and can be ignored, because we know that there is still a lot of PFAS leaking out of industrial processes. And it is as Teresa was saying, that the prospect of restrictions or banning of substances, even if the time horizon is quite long, does create strong incentives for the search for substitution. I mean, one of the sectors that I'm often sort of confronted with as needing PFAS, and it does, is hydrogen fuel cells. But when I went to visit the factory of BASF in Ludwigshafen recently, they showed me a research facility where they had already got a prototype of a PFAS-free membrane for hydrogen fuel cells. Okay, it cost at the moment 3 times as much, and it was only 40% as effective as the PFAS alternative, and so not commercially viable. But it shows that that European business is ready to embrace the opportunities of working towards the chemicals that are safe and sustainable by design. And I think one other part of the chemicals industry package that we're developing will be to see how we can better use our research programs, our research activities to support industry's efforts in looking for substitution. I also agree with Sylvie's point that when we're talking about restrictions, that can be banning substances, but it can also be measures that are designed to control the risks. And I think there was a very useful clarification from the 5 national authorities who have proposed the PFAS restriction just recently, where they explained that particularly for industrial applications where PFAS are still used and will need to be used for a relatively long-term time horizon, that we can also think in terms of risk management measures rather than just sort of phasing out use in things. Because, I mean, the point's also that that Beatrice is making about, it's not being in anyone's interest simply to export the production of chemicals from the European Union to other parts of the world where we know that the level of environmental or public health protection is significantly lower.
And then one quick follow-up is the Commission not kind of preempting the work of ECHA on the PFAS restriction by already weighing in on these areas where PFAS will be necessary and giving exemptions?
Well, we clearly cannot preempt the formal legal process. We need to be rigorous. We need to respect the scientific analysis that the agency needs to do. We need to give the space for the socio-economic assessment, and they need to come to then us with the opinions which are then used to base the Commission's opinion. So we cannot anticipate the outcome of that process in a legal way. But I mean, if you think back a few months, we did already in the spring of this year published a communication on essential use. This was part of the sort of preparatory work that we were doing for the revision of REACH. But it is in that document, we already highlight a number of areas where we see that uses of certain substances are essential for the green and digital transition that we're all championing, and which in the context of our new Clean Industrial Deal, the competitiveness compass that the President announced a few days ago, I mean, remain absolutely valid. So we can send signals to the industry, to the market, that we consider certain areas. I mean, semiconductors need PFAS. And
oh, sorry.
So no.
Rania, we haven't heard from Sylvie for a little bit, so I just wanted to go to Sylvie quickly to weigh in on this PFAS discussion.
Yeah, so I think a lot has been said already, and just to be clear, we support balanced regulatory action on PFAS. Clearly, those substances need to be regulated. You're absolutely right, because of the unique properties, chemical resistance, heat resistance. The performance is just so high, it makes the whole alternatives quite difficult and very specific to certain uses. What works in textile is not going to work in aerospace, is not going to work in semiconductors. Our focus, and we leave it to each sector, our focus is to look into the alternatives. Substitution is the daily life of companies. We don't always talk about it, but we work with customers about it, because when you get this prime mover advantage, yes, and we work with the customers. So rest assured, BASF is not the only one. There's a lot going on, for sure. But it's complicated to validate, in medical device, in aerospace, to validate an alternative, it takes a long time. And because the performance of PFAS is just so fantastic, it's very difficult to get the same with something else. So there's a conundrum there. For us, what matters is PFAS in industrial equipment, in our plants. It's a safety element, because if you have a corrosive, if you have temperature, you have pressure, that's what you have in the big chemical plants and other plants as well, but I can only talk for what we do. That's our focus of our work, so we're doing some further studies to look into the very specific uses, the alternatives. So we have a lot of work ongoing to go deeper into the alternatives where possible. There's also cases where we know it won't be possible, and we've been calling for some exemptions for industrial equipment where we know there's no alternative on the horizon. Why? Because with derogations, they are time limited. So every 5 or 10 years, we need to redo the whole process with ECHA. So we need to look at that process as well. Of course, it will evolve. We do need the clarity, though, and then back to what we were saying, for me, one of the big lessons learned, if we had done if we were doing in the future separate restriction dossiers for consumers, for professional users, probably, and for industrial uses, we would move faster. It would be more manageable for ECHA. We would look maybe more into bans in certain areas or into how to manage the release and the emissions. PFAS, we need to manage the waste as well. The valves, the membranes, when we do the maintenance of the plants, how do we manage the used part? So waste needs to be looked at, incineration conditions, how we measure in the environment. We don't even know how to measure properly the levels of PFAS in soil, in water. There's no method. We're doing an inventory right now. In the future, we will need to enforce the restriction. So we need to be able to measure one way or another. So that's also an area where we look to work with authorities, with everyone who wants to work to, again, give ourselves the means of implementing our legislation.
Thank you very much. This went way too quickly. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up there as we're already in extra time. But I did want to say thank you again to Teresa, Patrick, Beatrice, and Sylvie. I found this really interesting, and I hope you all did too. We will now be going into a networking break, and we encourage you to visit our Pro booth to get a taste of the exclusive Pro offer. And above all, don't forget to scan the QR code to claim your special Pro gift today. We will resume at 4:35 with the session Packaging Progress, Translating Talks into Action, moderated by my great sustainability colleague, Marianne Gros. So again, I just want to say thank you again to our speakers. Very interesting discussion.